Welcome to By Your Side, Divorce Law and Support.
Welcome back to By Your Side, Divorce Law and Support with Ms. Patricia. Pat is a longtime family law attorney and now dedicated divorce coach, helping women navigate the emotional and practical challenges of separation without the stress of hiring a lawyer. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about a question that weighs heavily on a lot of women. What happens to the house in a divorce? This is what happens to your house. Understanding property, debt, and divorce. Ms. Patricia, welcome back.
This is such a broad topic that I'm going to try and be specific as possible, but understand that these areas really need to be addressed with a personal attorney, or at least explored with a divorce coach prior to hiring an attorney, because it's a very broad topic. But I'm going to try to limit it and give you some basic information as to how you can think about this area of the law. What happens to the house? Okay. So there are several things that can happen to the home. Usually it's what we call a marital home under New York state law. Even if the woman has never paid a penny into the house or the mortgage or repairs, under New York state law, if the house was bought during the marriage, that's after the date of marriage, then the wife has an interest of 50% in that home. And when we say 50%, it can mean different things. And that's if the house is sold, it could be 50% of the selling price less the outstanding mortgage or taxes, any fees that are involved, etc. So she does have that. If the house is going to be kept, in many cases, especially the wives want to keep the marital home because of memories, because they have children and the children are entrenched in the situation with school and friends, etc. A woman may have her own circle of friends that she doesn't want to leave, so she wants the house. This is a tricky problem because most women can't afford to take on the mortgage and keep the house alone with one income. And understand that when this is all worked out with the divorce, the husband, does not have any further obligation to support the house. So we have to take a look at what are the finances of the wife, whether or not she can buy out the husband's share. So in other words, to try and make it as simple as possible, if the house is worth $500,000 and there's a $250,000 mortgage on it, the net value of that house is going to be $250,000. So if they sell it, they still have to sell it for over $500,000 or whatever. And then once the mortgage is repaid, the parties split to $250,000, less any taxes or fees. So you're not looking at a great deal of money once you divide it up. All of a sudden, a $500,000 house is maybe only worth $100,000. Right. So each party, let's say, gets $100,000, and then what do you do with it? I mean, we're talking about you're in a situation, especially in the metropolitan area or Long Island, where you can't buy a house for that kind of money. You can't even buy probably a co-op or condo. So it has to be thought out very carefully. And the salaries, the income of each party has to be looked at to see whether or not it's even possible. If the wife wants to keep the house and the husband agrees, then the wife has to qualify and refinance the mortgage so she can then buy out the husband. He gets his share, but she's got to carry a mortgage. Financially, her credit and everything has to allow her to do that. That's usually a very difficult problem to address. As far as any other properties, the other properties that are considered marital, what we call marital assets, would be savings account, any investments, pensions, 401k. Now, if you have a woman that's only a homemaker and she does not have any of these, pension or benefits, then whatever the husband has accrued from the date of the marriage to the date they file for divorce, the woman is going to get 50% of those assets also. Understanding that when we're talking about a pension, sometimes, let's say, I've had cases where the husband worked for, say, Con Edison, was a New York City teacher, and he had a pension already built up like $500,000. Wife gets half of that. That's wonderful. But they also need to understand that those monies have to be rolled over into a new account. And if they draw from that money currently, then they need to pay the taxes on it. So when women say, oh, well, he's got a pension, I'm going to get half of the pension, I can use that for a house. No, you really can't, because unless you're able to pay all of the income tax on that amount of money, you can't touch it. And the second thing is, women, especially women who aren't working, who don't have retirement funds, they need to understand that part of the pension needs to be invested for them so that when they hit 65, they'll be able to have some income to live. Social Security, usually doesn't do it. And if a woman hasn't worked, that's more of a problem. So those are the two major areas, what I call distribution of assets. Debt. Debt's another issue. Like you're getting 50% of the house or any investments, you get 50% of the debt too, as I'm speaking about women now.
Yeah.
Whether working or not. The only defenses you have as far as debt, and this could be the husband or the wife, is we're able to take, we're able to take a look at the debt and the amount of debt, and actually how the debt was incurred. Because if it's just the average debt from credit cards that, everybody seems to accrue for one reason or another, then it can just be divided. Sometimes there's student loans. A woman has worked and put the husband through medical school or law school. Those are different kinds of debt. And again, you do need a professional that's going to be able to go in depth and discuss exactly how those kind of things are addressed in a divorce. But the major thing to think about is what's going to happen to the house. Are the children going to be able to stay in the house? How can we make that work if possible? In many cases, unfortunately, it's not possible. The house has to be sold. And then, as I said, depending on the value of the house and the outstanding mortgage, that's what you're left with. So in many cases, in today's market, it's nothing. People could then have to go out and they have to rent because they can't afford to do anything else. So when you're looking into these issues before divorce, and it is best to address some of it before divorce, you can have a divorce coach which can outline the whole issue of the debt versus what the assets are. And there are women financial planners that I've worked with who will work with women who are being divorced or thinking about divorce to help them understand and help them to plan how is the best way to work with whatever funds or income they're going to have going forward as a single person, as a single parent. So these are steps that I think are very important to address prior to getting a lawyer and prior to getting involved in the emotional part of the divorce, because custody, kids, all of that is a very emotionally charged area. The finances should be addressed clearly, and I believe before you get involved with the divorce, so that the woman can understand what's going on, what needs to happen, and mostly how is the best way for her to survive financially going forward. So, as I said, this is a very complicated and extensive issue, but as far as getting it done, you do need a lot of professional help. And the best way to do it is to work with a coach beforehand, and then she can possibly hook you up with a financial planner that deals with women and divorce, because there are plenty out there. And you could go into the divorce feeling confident that financially what's going to happen, as opposed to finding out down the line where it becomes overwhelming and absolutely frightening. when women see what's happening with monies. If you don't work and you were just, had a good marriage with a husband that made decent money and you weren't used to thinking about it, all of a sudden it can be crippling to think that now you're on your own and what do you do and how do you survive? So these are important issues. They should definitely be addressed prior to the divorce. That's my strong belief. That's what I've seen work the best for women.
So Miss Pat, how do you help someone get clear of their on their financial reality when emotions are running high and there's property involved, there's all these things involved. Like how do you help someone get clear of that?
One of the issues, as you say, when it comes to the house, especially the marital home, women are very emotionally involved. And whether it's good or bad, that's to be determined. But it's a very emotionally charged situation because they want to keep the house. They cannot understand why they can't keep their house. They want the children to stay in the house. They want pretty much everything to remain normal as it was. They do not want to understand that this is not a normal situation. It cannot remain normal as it was before. Some women, if they're working and they say, well, I can afford the mortgage, I'll refinance, I can afford the mortgage. Well, that may be, but you then have to look at, are you then going to be house poor? In other words, it's every bit of your salary, income going towards a mortgage that's really more than you can handle. But you're not making the right, it's a case of making the right choice. They're difficult choices, but that's why a financial planner or a divorce coach can help you get through these issues before you get so emotionally embroiled in the idea of my home, they're taking my home.
Right.
You need a path before that preparation. So intellectually, more than emotionally, the woman can understand what's going to happen, what she can afford, and how is the best way to deal with it. I'll tell you a quick story of a woman. She was in a very unhappy marriage and she did not have a lot of money. She had a job working at a school, not making much money. And the house had to be sold. But again, there wasn't that much net value in the house. And she did call me about 2 months after she was divorced. And she said to me, selling that house was the best decision I made. She said, I'm sitting in my one studio apartment. I'm eating peanut butter and jelly. She said, but I've never been so happy in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tough decision to make. Women have to understand that, divorce means that it's not going to be the same way. So you have to understand there's a lot of concessions to be made, and nobody's going to be happy at the end of this divorce. And you need goals. And clients, when I was doing divorces, clients would come to me, and whether it was male or female, I would sit down with them and simply ask them, at the end of this process, what are your goals? What do you want to walk away with? What do you want to have remaining? You're going to have a lot of losses. There's a lot of sorrow involved in divorce. But ultimately, think about it now. What's the most important things that you want to be walking away with?
Mm-hmm.
And, that helps the client get some clarity. And if they're working with a divorce coach ahead of time, that can be clearly examined so that for women, it's always custody of my children. For men, I want to keep my pension. If I can tell you how many male clients have said to me, my pension's mine, right? And when you tell them, no, it's going to be shared, they become apoplectic because they feel it's their job, their money, they worked, they supported the house, they took care of the, and therefore the pension is theirs. Well, it's not. And it's a staggering fact for men to digest. But if these things are addressed beforehand with a financial planner or with a divorce coach, then there's no surprises during the divorce. It'll make your divorce go so much smoother. It will prevent the attorneys from escalating because attorneys will do that. They will take, whatever issue is there, and instead of trying to negotiate it, they will escalate. And of course, that costs more money. So if these important issues, what I call the trigger issues, custody, finances, the house, if those can be sort of addressed calmly before you even start the process, then you have sort of a roadmap. You know where you're going. And if you know ultimately the most important thing to me is custody, the most important thing to me is I want to keep the house, then all of the negotiations, whether it's letting him keep more of his pension so you get more of the value of the house, there's a lot of trade-offs that can be made. That's where the negotiation comes in. That's where a settlement comes in, because settlement means that the parties have taken all the assets and all the debt and they have agreed to work it out this way. So maybe the husband's not getting 50% of the house, but maybe he's getting 75% of his pension. She's getting more of the house. So these are things that clients don't understand. And once we start the divorce and things heat up, they're barely able to hear you. They're barely able to hear you, whether it's male or female. The more you keep talking, sometimes they're just not hearing it. And they just get trapped in this trench where they want. And it's not possible. These are issues that are best discussed beforehand and get a handle on them so that you have a clear view of where you're going and what you're going to end up with at the end of the divorce.
Miss Pat, if children are involved, how can housing decisions take their needs into account?
Again, it goes back to finances, because every parent, even mostly the fathers also, I will say, would like the children to remain in the home. They would like them to have, go to the same schools, have the same friends. All their extracurricular activities would remain the same. These are very important for children who are going through the trauma of divorce. Imagine how much more it's upsetting if you have to take them and change schools. Their friends are no longer available to them. Right. And their extracurricular has to all be changed or whatever. So there's a lot of changes children have to adapt to. Living with one parent, going to two different homes for visitation. They have to have two different, schedules as to who they're going to be with that day or that week. They don't have as much time available for play dates and stuff, because on Wednesdays, when they used to play baseball with their friends, now they have to go visit with dad because it's his visitation day. Yep. So there are a lot of traumatic changes for the children. And if you can keep the children in their home and keep them in the schools and with friends, that's a huge accomplishment. What I will say, I'll give you one example how finances can affect children and the marital home. I've used it a couple of times. This is a unique situation. It's a wonderful situation, but not many people can afford to do it. I call it nesting. It's something called nesting. And what it means is that the marital home is kept. The children remain in the marital home, their schools, everything's the same. But the parents are the ones that transition. So one week, the mother will stay in the marital home with the children. And then the next week, she moves out and the father comes in and stays a week. So the parents alternate instead of the children. The financial issue here is each parent has to be able to afford another apartment or someplace to live in the weeks they're not in the marital home with the children. As I said, I've had multiple people who are in that kind of a financial situation. It works out amazing for the children. The children are, I think, the happiest children of divorce that I've ever heard back, when I hear back from parents. The children are the happiest. They do very well. Their school, nothing changes for them, except there's one parent instead of two. But this is, as I said, it's a unique situation. Each parent has to have the financial ability to maintain a separate home. And then, of course, there has to be some emotional and respect between the parents, because, it's a wonderful situation. Not so wonderful if when the mother's there, when she comes in on Monday morning, she finds there's garbage piled up in the kitchen, there's
Mhm.
dishes done, the bathrooms are filthy, and the garbage hasn't been taken out. She's coming into that situation. So there's got to be emotional respect that each parent is going to do what they have to do to maintain the house. So when the other parent comes in, it's normal. It's the way you would want to come home to the house. So there are multiple issues. It's a wonderful, wonderful solution. But again, it's the best one for the kids, but it's not always possible. As far as other arrangements with the children, um, it's difficult. If the parents can't afford, um, when they find out their house poor and they're renting, sometimes they can only afford to rent a studio apartment, and then the issue becomes, well, I'm not letting my children stay over with the father because he doesn't have separate bedrooms for them. Well, you know what? The court looks poorly on that situation because the father has a right to the visitation. The children have a right to see their father. And if that's all he can afford, well, you know what? They get blow up beds and the kids sleep on the living room floor. Arrangements can be made. They have to be worked out one way or another. And it all depends on the financial position that each parent is left in after the divorce. But custody of children and visitation of children is a huge concern of the court. They want to make sure the children are taken care of, that they're not being abused. If there was a situation where dad has his girlfriend living in and they're in the bedroom and then the kids are sleeping on the floor, there's always different issues that come up. So it's very individual how things work out. But certainly not having separate rooms for your children does not mean that they cannot visit and stay overnight with you. So as far as housing and custody of children, that's pretty much how that works. Any other questions regarding this issue before we move on?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. That's it for us, though, Miss Pat. I know it's a broad topic. I know it's a lot of information, but I thank you for giving us what you could give us.
Okay, sure, anytime.
Worried about what's going to happen to your house, your finances, or your future? Divorce coaching can help you face those decisions with clarity and confidence. To learn more or schedule a session with Miss Pat, visit SokolichFamilyLaw.com and be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you found today's episode helpful, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.